to our speakers corner. Beautiful Brisbane Sunday. This is what we've got opposite. Lots of masked men. So yeah, police are here. That side. We've got some police outside too, so we're well covered. You okay, Sue?
Oh no, they're just talking.
They're not too loud though.
Well, they've not allowed any amplification.
Yeah. Okay. So they've been told that they're not allowed to have their PAs up. Are they allowed no amplification at all? So we'll see if they stick to it. We'll be starting shortly. We'll start soon. They want all children to feel safe and be the people that they really are. Children don't have a sexuality, you fucking... Just imagine what you'd find if you looked on their hard drives. Paedophile designed that flag. A paedophile, an actual paedophile designed that flag. We'll be starting soon. no justice, no peace, no racist police, is what they're currently chanting at the police. And now they're mocking him. Councilman, he has just told them to go away and go back to his office and not get involved. This is a member of the council, and they're currently walking away from them. Don't know if they've been defeated, but they've just basically said the police are racist and they don't want them anywhere near them. Parents, don't just tell your kids yes to everything. You're going to end up with a man baby like this. Tell your kids no sometimes. Don't give in to every whim. Don't give in to every tantrum. Look at all these flags. Look at all these ideologies.
I thought you were about to speak.
We're starting soon.
Give me a 30-second, 1-minute warning so I can set that.
Okay, yeah. Go and see. It's actually quite amusing. The men who never grew up. Oh, you've got to see this. You've got to see this. Right, this is dad dancing, literally on steroids, mate. Look at that. I admire how they're not afraid to just make tits of themselves in public, to be honest with you. Yeah, good on him. have someone, after I spoke, I'll stand next to it, but someone standing by the tripod just in case
Yeah.
someone tries to plug it. And then when I've spoken, I'll... Ready?
Yeah. Have you got your mom? Oh, you got your mom. Isn't it working?
We're on. Hello, hello. Thank you for the dad dancing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Speaker's Corner this beautiful Sunday afternoon in Brisbane. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. So we advertised this event, and as expected, a group of men have turned up with their signs and their flag, ready to shout us down. They can't handle women like us standing here saying men aren't women. They're determined to strip us of every space we've got. Not a platform, not a voice, not even a fucking changing room. To those passing by, take a look at what's happening over here. These are the men who want unfettered access to your daughters, wives, mothers and grandmothers' single-sex spaces. We say no. And it's not just here. Look at one of the hundreds of examples I could have pulled from the US, where swimmers like Riley Gaines and her teammates were told to simply accept a towering man, William Thomas, not only taking over the women's changing room with his dick out, but also stealing their medals. They were expected to shrug it off for the sake of inclusivity. They said no. And we're exhausted hearing from the wobbly basement dwellers that winning doesn't matter in sport. It does. We're sick of hearing that sport is all about feelings. Sport is about fair competition, and we, like millions of others, are done watching it be eroded.
Yes.
Here in Australia, it's no better. Take Park Run, supposed to be a community organised run for everyone. Now we've got men pretending to be women, or at least men decked out in sports bras and women's running pants, taking the places of women and girls. I feel so sad for the young girls, especially at those park runs. Imagine being a kid, finding something you can excel at, only to have it snatched away by a bloke twice your size, even at an amateur level. How is that supposed to encourage girls to take up sport when they can see no chance of winning? Research shows that young girls' physical activity rates are already dropping. Only about 1 in 5 Aussie girls aged 13 to 17 meet the guidelines. Physical activity is critical for their health, confidence and mental well-being, yet we're letting it slip through their fingers for the sake of appeasing a few men. And that is why we're standing here. The situation for women and girls in Australia is dangerous. In the UK, NHS nurses were forced to share changing rooms with men who say they're women and told to re-educate themselves when they push back. Here, men are being encouraged by doctors to breastfeed babies. Let me just repeat that. In Australia, healthcare professionals are encouraging men to breastfeed babies. Jasmine Sussex, a Victorian breastfeeding expert and absolute fucking legend, with years of experience, a woman who has breastfed multiple babies herself, is being dragged through the courts by a man who, ironically, is a healthcare professional himself. This bloke calls himself Jennifer Buckley, tried to breastfeed his newborn after taking hormones to lactate. And I know you'll be watching this, Jennifer, you're disgusting. We need to go back to a time, not that long ago, when calling this stuff out was the dutiful thing to do, when protecting kids and speaking truth wasn't a legal risk. Teenage girls are being steered towards surgery and hormones because they're told they might be born in the wrong body. Men have been ushered into our spaces, bathrooms, sports, refuges, because if we say no, they'll try and cancel us. But most of us here are uncancelable. Look at Moira Deeming, the Victorian MP, smeared as a Nazi for speaking out. She fought back and won her defamation case against that little weasel of a man, John Pesutto. The Nazi label has totally lost its sting. No one believes it. It doesn't work anymore. You can see who we are. We're just a group of regular women and men who are tired of being told that we are somehow hateful for protecting our rights and the rights and bodies of our children. Our government's useless. They've got no backbone, no integrity. Until recently, our last Minister for Women couldn't even tell us what a woman was. Our politicians should be there to speak up for the majority, and the majority agree with us, to protect the rights and safety of most Australians. Instead, they're leaving it to citizens like Sal Grover, a mum who's had to drag her case through the courts at enormous financial and mental cost, just to get clarity on what a woman is. Because they can't decide. Now picture this little scene. Two Greens Party foot soldiers a few days ago knock on my door, armed with their glossy leaflets, extolling some dreary candidate. I, ever the gracious host, say, okay, I'll indulge you, but first, pray tell, what's the definition of a woman? And my God, what followed was just pure insane. Their faces crumpled into utter bewilderment, as if I'd demanded they recite pi to the nearest 30 decimal points. These two paragons of progressive virtue stood there, agog, lips flapping uselessly, refusing to answer, incapable of it, they couldn't. Their minds simply short-circuited. I thought to myself, you lot fancy yourself in the future of governance, yet you can't define the bedrock of humanity. We're stuck with a leadership too scared to confront the cult of transgenderism head-on. Wouldn't it be a relief to have a leader who'd just say it straight? Men cannot be women. We're here speaking out because this isn't just about words. It's about the safety and rights of women and girls being dismantled. These men, signs and pedo flags are part of a system that's forgotten what boundaries are. We haven't. We have our boundaries very much intact, and we say no, and they hate that. Thank you for listening, Brisbane. Who's next?
Who wants to speak?
When we last gathered, a young woman stood in protest, holding a sign that said, "They hate you." I found it interesting her sign didn't say, "I hate you," or "We hate you." It said, "They hate you." So who is the they in the "They hate you" sign that this young woman is referring to? Is she referring to the trans-identifying man who wants to gain access to women's only bathrooms and change rooms? Or is they referring to the mediocre male athlete who could not cut it in men's sporting events, but is a newfound superstar in women's sport? Or was she referring to the white, middle-aged man who found himself at the bottom of the DEI priority list, but discovered that changing his pronouns and putting on a dress and some lippy leapfrogged him to the top of our most vulnerable and diverse? So stunning, so brave. Or is they referring to those poor lesbians who are trapped in a man's body? Or is she referring to the parents who celebrate their children's journey through unnecessary and permanent surgical procedures, and who commit their child to a lifetime of pharmaceutical dependency because they agree their child was born in the wrong body. What do these parents say to their child after the gender industry collapses in on itself? As Helen Joyce said, there is no way back for them and their child. They have sold their child a bill of goods they can't deliver on. Or maybe they is referring to the political activists who are farming votes from the single issue voters that parties like the Greens and Labor tap into. Or it could be the trans-identifying men who are incarcerated in women's prisons. Who wants to be in a men's prison after all, when an alternative is so easy to achieve? I read numerous articles on this topic, and most of them focused on what was best and safest for the trans-identifying inmate, and none made mention of the safety of female prisoners. Or she may be referring to companies like Pfizer and AbbVie, who make billions of dollars a year from the sale of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, and the surgeons who are stuffing their pockets with cash obtained from performing unnecessary surgery on children and adults with mental health issues. The trans movement has also given us many sporting heroes. These people probably hate us because how could they have achieved their glory without the influence of gender ideology? Athletes like we saw at the Paris Olympics with the boxers Kayleigh and Lynn, both fighting in the women's category, given the International Olympic Committee uses a classification criteria based on what gender is written in their passports. Now, neither Kayleigh or Lynn identify as trans, but both had previously been banned from boxing in the women's category due to failed gender testing. It is likely they are DSD, differences in sexual development. Trans-identifying men who self-ID as women and men with DSD are two different things. But if you have DSD and XY chromosomes with the make male gene and you knowingly compete in women's sport, then this is called cheating.
Yes.
The IOC put women at risk when they kowtowed to the gender ideologues. Once again, we saw the blatant disregard for the right to safe and fair sport for women. Honestly, so many men have benefited from this movement and so many women have lost. Last year's UN report titled Violence Against Women and Girls, Its Causes and Consequences states that more than 890 medals in 29 different sports have been lost to men competing in women's sport. Other sources like HeCheated.org have these numbers significantly higher. The UN report also states instances have been reported where adult males have been included in teams of underage girls, resulting in injuries including knocked out teeth, concussions resulting in neural impairment, broken legs and skull fractures. As a mother, I can't imagine how parents must feel when their athletic, talented daughter ends up with brain damage because some big Dave decides he wants to play with the girls. Others who probably hate us. The 2024 Model of the Year, won by a trans-identifying male. A photo celebrating the win in Teen Vogue shows him posing ridiculously thin with large fake breasts. What an obscene role model for our teen girls. The 2024 BBC Women's Football Player of the Year, what we call soccer, was an athlete who was banned from the Women's African Cup of Nations, again due to failed gender testing. With women's football seeing record growth here and around the world, this was the player the BBC decided to put on a pedestal. They are mocking us. And of course, the actor Carla Gascon, a man who at the age of 44 started identifying as a woman and who has been nominated in one of 5 spots for the Academy Award for Best Actress. To be honest, I hope Gascon wins this one. Hollywood women have been no friend of the women's rights movement. So for their most coveted accolade to go to a man seems an appropriate recompense. The list of people that hate us could have me standing here all day, as there are so many who benefit from gender ideology, whether it be financially, socially, or physically. There are so many grifters in this movement, but the grift is up. It does not matter if there is only one of us that turns up to this rally, or 100 of us. The message is the same. The platforming of an ideology that puts the sex-based rights of women and girls last must stop.
Yes.
So to the young lady that held the they hate you sign, I would have to agree with you. These people sure do hate us, because when there are people that point their fingers and say, look everyone, look at these people, look at what they are doing, they don't like that. To the haters, we see you, we are exposing you, and we won't be quiet until our rights are returned.
Woo!
I just want to point out,
It's just there on the back.
that we have the trans extremists once again on their campaign, sustained campaign, to stop us, to intimidate us and harass us. They've been doing this for 12 months. We're not putting it up with this shit anymore. How can the authorities allow these people to continue to have a campaign like this against us? We've had enough. You won't win. There's too many that do not support you. We just get the brave ones that come out because others are afraid of losing their jobs. How pathetic. Men laughing as women who are the patriarchy at its bloody worst. They put on a dress, claim they're a woman, and then they harass and intimidate actual women into silence. That is patriarchy at its worst, and they claim they are women. They don't behave like women. They don't look like women. They are not women. Who wants to speak? Do you want to speak? You want to use Andrew. Take the swap.
Just swapping mics. I think it's a signal thing.
One, two. Leah? Got me?
Pardon? Yeah.
Women should not require a police guard to gather in public to discuss the erosion of our rights. These men who gather here each time we speak have no authorisation to gather and no authorisation to use a PA. We have authorisation to be here by the council to hold this event. We are here lawfully. But obstructing, interrupting or disturbing our event is prohibited under the Peaceful Assembly Act. But they show up every single time to intimidate and abuse us. It doesn't matter where we set up in the city. It's been a targeted campaign of stalking and harassment. It's not just here in Brisbane City that this is happening. It happens in Melbourne. This happens in Hobart, this happens in Wellington, this happens in New York City, this happens in Paris, this happens in the UK, all across the UK. They continue with their threatening behaviour, demonstrating once again exactly why they do not belong in women's spaces.
Woo!
Before I go on, they're so self-important, they're shouting at me now that they can't hear me. Why do you think they can't hear? Because they've got a PA drowning us out intentionally, honestly. Before I go on, I want to send healing light and love to the woman in Cairns who was brutally raped in a terrifying home invasion on Friday. The woman survived that horrific ordeal, but she was raped at knife point by 3 teenage boys, a trauma she will likely never recover from, nor will her family. It's something they will have to live with for the rest of their lives, that fear that they will live with forever. I used to live on the same street in Cairns where 2 of those rapists were arrested. I cannot begin to imagine what that woman endured. I will extend that healing light and love to any survivors of male violence and sexual assault or child abuse present here today. I know some of you, and I'm so sorry for your pain. But it is yet again a reminder that women are not safe, not even in our own homes. There is an epidemic of male violence against women. Yet we are told by the state that women and girls do not need nor deserve single-sex, female-only spaces or sports. How can this possibly be true? We're told that we must accommodate men who have lady feels in our spaces, the very same spaces that are vital for the healing of rape victims, trauma victims, victims of other male violence. Spaces which provide some, albeit not much, protection and refuge from men. These spaces, such as bathrooms, changing rooms, female-only gyms, DV shelters, rape crisis services, they provide women and girls with space away from the presence of men, away from the male gaze. And for women recovering from male violence, these spaces are crucial for them to be able to participate in society. But we're told the feelings and demands of violent, abusive thugs like those over there are more important than the needs and feelings of women and our daughters. And what's more, on top of this absolute denial of women's human rights, we're also told we must refer to these delusional men as she and her. They are women after all. In the eyes of the law right now, and yes, this is the case here in Queensland as well, these men are absurdly considered women because they demand it. These laws obviously must be repealed, and we again call upon Premier David Crisafulli and the Minister for Women, Fiona Simpson, to repeal self-ID in this state. Yes. Any man who enters a female-only space transgresses women's boundaries and is a danger to women and girls. Any man who ignores calls from women to stay out of our spaces is a danger to women and girls. Any man who claims womanhood as his identity, be he a predator or not, has no respect for women and girls, and women and girls have absolutely every right to feel uncomfortable and fearful in his presence. As an example of what happens to women when gender identity is a protected characteristic, look at the recent case in Scotland of nurse Sandy Peggy, who was suspended from her work for the NHS after she objected to being forced to share changing facilities with a male doctor who adopted a transgender identity. She was punished for acknowledging reality. As we have said here many times, there is a clear collision of rights when, as happened in Australia back in 2013, gender identity was inserted into our Federal Sex Discrimination Act as a protected characteristic, and the definitions of man and woman were removed. Thank you very much, Julia Gillard and Mark Dreyfus, the still Attorney General. This is how Sal Grover has ended up in the federal court when a man who says he's transgender claimed discrimination when he was rightly booted off a social networking platform designed for females only. The rights of different groups must be balanced in the application of any of these so-called progressive inclusion policies, and as it stands, women's rights have been pushed to the periphery when really, considering the extremely obvious ramifications and safeguarding risks, They should always have been centred in any discussion. Trans women are not women. Trans women are men, plain and simple. Men in dresses are just that. They are not women, and they most certainly are not lesbians. All men, regardless of their special identities, need to stay out of women's spaces and our sports. And before anyone starts crying about their existence, let me finish with the words of the wonderful Bev Jackson, founder of the LGB Alliance UK. Everyone exists. We all have to share this world with other people and to take account of other people's rights and interests. You can identify however you want. That's a personal matter. But it is absurd and counterproductive to try to force society to pretend you can change sex. These demands cause harm to women and LGBT people. You use the deceptive letters LGBTQ, but LGB interests are not the same of those of the TQ plus activists. We will not be cowed by emotional manipulation or threats from gender identity zealots who insist on yoking us together. Thanks, Nerissa. Who else would like to speak?
Thanks. Nerissa, I mean, away from the male gaze, I thought you liked me, mate. Like, really. Picking up on your point of that's our learned colleague over there is not a woman, plain and simple. I think they'd have to be a little bit more intelligent and a little bit more attractive to be plain or simple. But speaking of male gaze, on the notion of trans women are women, the male gaze dating apps. Now, accepting the premise that trans men are men and trans women are women, why are they both on the male gaze dating apps? Surely it should just be one of them. Pick one. Can you even just pick one? No. I'm not going to say it's anything to do with a rabid coercion, because let's be honest, it's not going to happen naturally, is it? It concerns me at a bare minimum that they don't even notice the internal contradictions in their own rhetoric. I had a delightful experience on Twitter last night that started out with, oh, no, that's not true. No, it's not a mental disorder. It's not a mental disorder. It's, no, it's a condition. I was like, okay. Oh, no. I know, right? Call it what you wish. I said, okay, look, if it's not a mental health disorder, then it's a biological disorder. You're currently upset ostensibly because cis kids can have access to leprolide acetate, etc. They have to get GnRH stimulation testing. It's not like they can go up to a paediatrician and say, I identify as having precocious puberty. Like, they get physically tested to see if they even have it and the type of precocious puberty. It's a highly limited drug. Regardless of that, they're saying, oh, but trans kids are being denied it. Yes, because you've just said it's not a physical condition either. This woman continued and goes, it's not a mental health condition. It's not a physical condition. Okay, then why is it being funded? The taxpayer should not have to fund someone's imagination. Personally, if I had, an extra few inches and pecs, I'd feel really affirmed in my gender. but I can't see any taxpayer copping to that. So, if it's cosmetic, shut up and do it in a private clinic away from me and not to kids. Is that too much to ask? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak?
You turned it off again.
Yeah, so they say a man can be a woman because your chromosomes and your genitalia doesn't make you a man or a woman. Yet here we are telling kids they're born in the wrong body and chopping off their breasts. So talk about hypocrites.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, we've got another speaker.
Come on, stand closer. No.
Hello. Hello? That's better. I just wanted to share with you a great summary of what the Labor Party has done for Australian women that was put into X by a woman called Jess, and I think it deserves a bit more of an airing. She sent this to Albo. She says, ahead of International Women's Day, we reflect on what Labor has done for Australian women. In 2013, the Gillard government removed the biological definitions of women from the Sex Discrimination Act and introduced gender self-ID. Essentially, the legal definition of woman became anyone who says they're a woman. In 2024, the conflict between sex and gender ID was tested in court for the first time when a man who calls himself a woman sued Sal Grover for not letting him onto her female-only social app. The man won. Sal is appealing, and the man is also appealing for more money and a decision upgrade. In just the last month, Kiralee Smith was hit with an apprehended violence order for the crime of calling a man in a women's soccer team a man. And because a man is a woman if he says so. In 2024, ex-breastfeeding counsellor Jasmine Sussex spoke out against trans-identified men breastfeeding their children. Those who do so by taking an experimental cocktail of drugs to induce a mimicry of lactation. For speaking out on behalf of children, Jasmine is to face Queensland's Civil and Administrative Tribunal. She does so online tomorrow. For the breastfeeding associations have brought into this ideology. In 2023, the organisation Lesbian Action Group had to apply for an exemption to the Sex Discrimination Act just to hold a female, lesbian-only event. They were denied. They appealed. They were denied again. Australian women now not only need legal permission to organise, they are now told no when they ask for it because men are lesbians if they say so. In the last year, Sydney's women's soccer team, the Flying Bats, which boasts 5 trans-identified men on the squad, has been crushing the competition. Women's teams who object to the safety risks and unfairness of playing against them have been intimidated into silence or forced to forfeit. Throughout Australia, Labor has introduced gender self-ID, which enables people to change their sex on legal documentation, including birth certificates. With $130, a 10-minute online form and a stamp, a man can be legally considered a woman
and gain access to all women's spaces, protections, sports, opportunities, and be counted as women in any and all record keeping, such as male pattern violent crime, now recorded as female. Thanks to Labor's self-ID laws, the crisis housing and support services for female DV victims that Labor brags about are accessible to men who call themselves women. Female-only safe spaces do not exist under Labor. Throughout Australia, male criminals who call themselves women are being housed in women's prisons. This includes violent offenders, sex offenders, and pedophiles. In one such case, the female prisoners of Victoria's Dame Phyllis Frost Correctional Centre for Women petitioned to have a rapist and pedophile relocated, and they were ignored. These are drops in the ocean of examples. Labor has created an Australia in which women are defined as a feeling in someone's head. Under Labor, biology is irrelevant, and the way our biology informs our social and psychological experience is also irrelevant. Any services, bonuses, or shiny presents Labor claims to have granted women aren't actually for women. They are for anyone who calls themselves women. Women have confronted this in the courts, and it has been legally ruled that identity trumps biological reality. Labor boasts about closing the gender pay gap and women in the workforce, yada yada. But when any man can say they're a woman and anyone a man, and even birth records can be legally falsified, any sex-based data is going to be unreliable. Under Labor, the true socio-economic status of Australian women is obfuscated. When women asked Julia Gillard, whose government made the amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, if she regretted what she'd done to Australian women, she laughed and changed the subject. And she called it a gotcha parlour game. When Queensland's Minister for Women, previous, Shannon Fentiman, was criticised by women for championing Queensland gender self-ID, she blocked those women on social media. When Queensland Premier Steve Miles was criticised for these same Labor policies, he did the same. When a bill was proposed to undo the damage to our Sex Discrimination Act, Australia's Minister for Women, Katie Gallagher, blocked it and refused to even discuss the matter. Ahead of this IWD, we reflect on how the Australian Labor Party hasn't done anything for women in a long time, but it's done a hell of a lot to us.
Gotcha.
We have another speaker.
Oh. First of all, I'd like to point out and welcome here for the fourth time the young man over there dressed up as a terrorist with his head and face covered in a keffiyeh and sunglasses. Two more over there also with balaclavas on. These counter-protesters opposite want to persuade us that men trying to disguise their sex so as to cross women's boundaries with impunity do not pose a threat of violence to women inside women's single-sex spaces. And to support that argument, they come here playing dress-up as violent men. Nice message consistency, you morons. Last month, The United States Congress started debating a bill to ensure fairness in the sports of women and girls by formally stating that sports for women and girls are for people whose sex is female. Of course, this shouldn't need to be stated, except that an influential, privileged, highly organised, well-funded bunch of liars has set out to make this world stupider and meaner, and found the progressive parties of the West to be the perfect, useful, gullible idiots to legally enforce their radicalism. The progressive opposition to keeping the sports of women and girls female is characteristically full of lies about forcing people in women's sports to prove their eligibility by removing their pants. Were this the truth, this would in fact be as invasive as they say. But it is a flat-out lie, as we should expect from people who lie that there are more than two sexes, that people can change sex, that the sexes are not physically and psychologically dimorphic, that chemically castrating and stunting teenagers is good for their mental health, and that teenagers can even give consent to being chemically castrated and stunted. Trans activism is lies to protect misrepresentations, to enforce delusions, to promote harm. Sex testing can be, and has been, done by a simple swab of a person's cheek and examining that biological material for evidence of which of the two sexes a person is. A survey after the Atlanta Olympics in 1996 found most female athletes are in favour of continuing this. Why? Because it ensures fair competition, which is what any good sportsman or sportswoman should prize and seek to defend above all. It ensures fair competition because the two sexes are inescapably physically dimorphic as a result of evolution by natural and sexual selection. The progressives will say this cheek swab is invasive. But let's compare. Is it as invasive as sticking a Q-tip a mile up your nose so as to be allowed to visit your grandparents, or go to work, or go to the cinema? Is it as invasive as telling institutions where you have been and when?
Yeah.
Both of those are justifiable in a deadly pandemic. Both were required during COVID, and the progressives were the most zealous enforcers of that invasiveness. In the case of at least some professional sports, it is essential to tell institutions where you will be and when for every day of the year. Professional cyclists use a so-called whereabouts system to say where they'll be for 1 hour of every day between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. They also have to advise their overnight location, any periods of travel during those days, where they will train and where they will race. They must do this for a full quarter of a time ahead of time. Running changes are possible, but one clerical error in this leads to a professional sanction, and more than one might threaten your livelihood and reputation. Oh, that sounds pretty invasive, right? Why do professional cyclists submit to it? To ensure fair competition, to make sure no competitors have an unfair physical advantage. It is all part of anti-doping enforcement. It is to protect professional cycling so that people can go on getting paid to ride bicycles on television, and to protect the social license of the sport after the dark age of doping in the 90s and 2000s. If the competition is known to be unfair and rigged, it will lose fans and sponsors, and it should. But the invasiveness goes even further. What is tested to ensure a cyclist, male or female, is not doping? Their urine. How is that collected in a way to ensure a doping athlete does not substitute someone else's clean urine for their own? By having the anti-doping tester watch while you fill up the cup, while the cyclist fills up the cup. That's pretty invasive as well. But sportsmen and women submit to this for the sake of fair competition. Another thing that is tested is blood. That is collected by a needle, of course. There are things more invasive than a needle, but not many. Except, I suppose, when progressives tell us that needles are not invasive, but cheek swabs are. Just as anti-doping invasiveness is needed for the integrity and social licensing of professional sporting competition, for the health of athletes and for the sake of fans, so sex testing is also required in sport for the social license and integrity of sport for women and girls, to protect the health of women and girls from the dimorphically greater physical power of men and boys, and to protect the achievements of women and girls from lying, cheating men and boys. Transgender rights activism in the progressive left is for lying, cheating men. But women's sports should be for female people because all sport should be fair.
a great way to spend a Sunday. These guys have all come out with all the colourful paraphernalia. I suggest to everybody, take a photo to remember this, because it won't be long. No one's going to believe this ever happened. The hair-coloured people over the side there want to pretend that we are their enemy and that they're fighting a war against us for speaking up about reality. The fact is, they are warring against reality itself. And I've got some bad news for you. Reality wins. I can stop there, but I've got more. It's interesting, these guys have got their supposed non-binary identities, one of whom is speaking right now. I'm not sure where on the gender spectrum he falls since he's changed his hair colour. However, the origins of non-binary in a legal context all stem from one individual in the state of Oregon a few years ago. His name was Jamie Shoup. And he was the one who went into court with a lot of gender issues, a lot of PTSD, mental illness galore, and convinced the judge that he deserved to be a special third category, rather than male, rather than female, put an X on his passport and his driver's license. That sparked the spread of the non-binary trans insanity that has gone around the world. A couple of weeks ago, Jamie Shoup killed himself. Game over. I don't celebrate that at all, but I do celebrate the moments of clarity that he had on the Benjamin Boyce podcast, where he confessed to the absolute torment that he'd been going through mentally and how that was exploited by the flag-waving ideological nut jobs over there who we'll look back at on Facebook 5 years' time and go, was that really a thing? Did they really believe that? On those podcasts, Jamie Shoup spoke to all of the competing paraphilias. He was a cross-dresser. He tormented the hell out of his wife. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be male or female, but that thought would not escape him. And that collision with reality destroyed his mental health completely and ultimately took his life. In the few moments of clarity he had on those podcasts, he spoke to the fraud that is replete through the entire trans movement. And on that note, I want to highlight how any of you over there are making reference to sexuality have not got a clue what the word means. Sexuality is about sex. If you want to erase sex and replace it with hair dye and pronouns, you're basically being as homophobic as you can get. There's good news though, and again, take your photos to remember this stuff. And all of you who have ever uttered the phrase trans women are women, if you really believe that or ever really believed that, I would love for you to get a tattoo that says that, because in 5 years' time, you're going to cringe so hard you're going to implode. Reality's winning. Trump's already passed the laws to determine what sex is in legislation. The only reason this took off here in the first place is because we are subservient to the Americans. The American insanity is over. It won't be long until we catch up. So all of you, delete your pronouns, apologise for this ridiculous performance, and restore reality. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just going to read something. Sometimes on Twitter or Facebook I see something and I just think, oh, it deserves being read out. So this is Diana Alastair. She says, female-only spaces are necessary for women. They are meant to provide safety, privacy, and the comfort of knowing that when you finish your business and open the stall door, there won't be a man waiting for you on the other side of it with his skirt pulled up and his girl dick in his hand, because they're very fond of their girl dick. They tell us that all the time. 99% of rapists are men and 90% of rape victims are women, while 82% of molested children are girls. Women are catcalled, objectified, harassed and assaulted on a distressingly regular basis, almost always by men. I refuse to believe that anyone with a functioning brain truly fails to understand why women might not want men around when we are especially vulnerable when seated in a tiny cubicle with one exit. Trans-identifying men are not only trespassing in spaces where women aren't supposed to worry about a male presence, they are also sexually exploiting both the spaces and the women in them. There is a whole category of pornography that centres on trans-identifying men who film themselves, I won't mention the word because there's kids around here, in women's spaces, and even film the women in those spaces without their consent or knowledge.
Oh, you got some water?
Trans-identifying men have also posted about how much they enjoy listening to the sounds of women's bodily functions, while others brag online about stealing used pads and tampons, and we know why, to wear and insert. They boast about leaving semen on stalls to rub it in, as a reminder that we must endure their perversions and their presence. They take creep shots under stall dividers, and any woman who dares to confront them risks aggression and even physical assault. This invasion steals not only our sense of safety, it also robs us of our privacy, our dignity and our modesty. Most women are not comfortable with the idea of changing clothes or using the bathroom around strange men. Some are even prevented from doing so by religious strictures. The bottom line is that women are especially vulnerable to certain types of violence because of our sex, and that some men are equally prone to violence for the same reason. In an effort to alleviate some of that threat, certain spaces have been sex segregated so that women can have safety, privacy and separation from the male gaze when taking care of our bodily needs. Women-only spaces provides women with a measure of protection so that we can fully participate in public life. And remember that, that's what the suffragettes fought for. There weren't even female public toilets. And women all around the world, there were male public toilets but not women public toilet. It was known as a urinary leash. We're back to that. So these men are forcing women who are too afraid to use the public toilets to exclude. Any man that objects to the existence of these spaces, however he may identify, clearly does not have good intentions. Any man who goes as far as to trespass in women's spaces has committed a predatory act, and he should face prosecution and at least a year behind bars. Good men stay out, only bad men want access. Trans-identifying men, they should never ever be referred to as women. That is the problem when women wanted to be kind and said, yes, you can use the word woman. We don't really believe you're a woman. We know you have some sort of mental distress. And look what you've done to us. No more being kind. We realise now that being kind gets us nowhere. I don't care if you call us Nazis, because as far as I'm concerned, you're the ones that are authoritarian. You compel speech and thought, and if we don't comply, we have to suffer the consequences. We're never going to stop. Our numbers will get bigger because of what Donald Trump has done. If you think Australia won't follow suit, you're complete and utter idiots. Anyway, is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Just a really quick addendum. I don't want to put a spotlight on what's going on over there, but I do want to speak in the abstract about children who might be confused about their identity and how ripe for exploitation they can be. I can speak from my own experience and know, well, universally, puberty is difficult. Finding an identity at all is very, very tricky. Being wrapped up in a flag and fed lies on the with conditional love attached is child abuse, and I'm looking at it right now. That's absolutely an abuse of privilege, an abuse of parenthood. That is child abuse we're witnessing right there. Yeah, to tell a child that they're born in the wrong body, or that to be themselves, the journey of self-acceptance, is the journey that we're all on for life. And yeah, being a teenager is difficult, but you do not need external pharmaceuticals to be yourself. You do not need a scalpel to intervene so you can be yourself. You guys are lying to children, and those lies have real-world consequences. Your hair dye does not mask your, well, it actually advertises your insanity, so it's kind of a warning, like a deadly mollusk or something. It just makes me so sad, because this insanity has real-world consequences, and for the general public and the bureaucrats and the cogs in the machine to just play along and wait for someone else to fix this, you all need to stand up. And if it's something as small as deleting your pronouns, do it. If it's something as small as disagreeing and saying, hang on a sec, that doesn't sound right to me. What about kids? Like, that should be the threshold, surely. And if we can't get that straight, if we can't protect children, and we're going to let these flag-waving ideologues brainwash them, who are we as a society? Honestly, you need to stand up and reclaim sanity. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? I just want to let everyone know who's watching, we're Woman Up Queensland, so you can follow us on Twitter or X. The handle is @WomanUpSpeak. I'll hand you over to Leah now and she'll close.
Thank you everybody for coming. It truly, from the bottom of my heart, it's amazing. And yeah, like Sue said, please follow us. If you're looking on the sidelines and next time you want to come and support and speak, please follow us and come to the next one. These are people who are talking publicly about children's sexuality, who are advocating for men to breastfeed babies. These are the people with the flag designed by an actual paedophile who want access to my daughter's spaces. And there's absolutely no way on earth that I'm going to allow that to happen without standing here month after month saying absolutely not. No. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. See you next time. Thanks everybody for watching. This is what they do. David is a fully grown man with a pink cat on the back of his t-shirt, standing in public talking about children's sexualities.
Isn't that what you wanted?
Your flag was literally designed by a paedophile. The trans one. Pink, baby pink, baby blue. Why is it baby?
Yeah.
Baby blue,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I think so. Well, they were told.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was.